Why do we agonize over which lens produces a normal angle of view? And by normal, that would be roughly what the human eyes see. Is it 35 or is it 50 millimeter? What is a normal field or angle of view? In 35 millimeter film or full frame, a normal angle of view is produced by a 43 millimeter lens. So a 35 basically is a little bit wide, and a 50 is a little bit telephoto. So a 43, getting back to 43 in practical terms. So this, I'm trying to frame this in some type of something that you can relate to. Okay, so let's take an American football field. And if you please draw your attention here to where my cursor is moving. If a person is on a sideline of an American football field and aiming across the field to like a target across the field directly at the 50, the frame, the left edge of the frame would cut out right about at the 28-yard line, and for the same on the right side of the frame. Each side would cut out at about the 28-yard line. So let's talk about how we derive what is normal. A normal is based on the hypotenuse of either the film frame or a sensor. So here we have the formula, right? C equals the square root of a squared plus b squared. So you just square one leg, because this would become a right triangle, right? You square one side, square the other, add them up, and take the square root. So in this formula, it comes out to 43 millimeters, okay? So in full frame, in film, 43 is generally a normal lens. Okay, so let's look at a 35. Under the same similar conditions, the frame left and right would cut out at about the 22.5-yard line. For 50, we get tighter. The frame would cut out at about the 31-yard line on each side of the frame. So let's look at all of them next to each other. So here we have the 35 in yellow, the 43 in black, and the 50 millimeter in red. And down below here on the bottom, I have the respective yard lines they would cut out, right? Again, just recapping, the 35 would cut out at about the 22.5, the 43 would cut out at about the 28, and the 50 would cut out at the 31. So the reason we agonize over these lens choice, the reason we agonize of 35 versus 50, is that neither one is actually a normal field of view. The normal field of view is right in, almost in the middle of the two, right? So we could err wide, or we could err telephoto. And that's why, literally, that's why we have such a tremendous hard time choosing between 35 and 50. Okay, let's move on. So let's talk about fixed lens rangefinders. So if you're interested in exploring this a little bit further, this normal field of view photography, and you want to get into the 40-ish range, so there's some old fixed lens rangefinders that I highly recommend. I have all three of these cameras, and I'll show you some images in just a moment. But so for 40 millimeter, these are all fixed lens. These are not interchangeable lenses. You have the Canon EQL17G3 at 40, Olympus 35 SP at 42, and the Yashica Electro 35 GSN at 45 millimeter. And you can get all three of these clean, almost to the point of being mint, for about $200. These are tremendous value. So again, the body and the lens come as one unit. They're not interchangeable. The lens doesn't come off. So it's an incredible value at about $200 for almost a mint condition camera. And if you don't want to get like an all-in-one unit, right? If you want to just get some standalone lenses. So we talk about some lenses here. And these are full-frame compatible. So these aren't specifically made for APS-C or micro four thirds or 1 inch, right? Where you would vignette the frame of a full frame. So these are all compatible with full frame. You have the Fotolander 40 millimeter. You have a Minolta Rokkor 40 millimeter, and Canon makes a Pancake 40 millimeter. And again, these are all, I think I've seen all of these images that these lenses produce, and they're wonderful images. So these are 6 options. If you wanted to explore this further, I'm just throwing out 6 options for you here. And these are a few images here. And again, please, I'm not trying to, these are not destined for MoMA. I'm not, right, these are snaps. I just go out. That's how I decompress and de-stress. I just go out and I just photograph things. So here I'm at the Union Pacific. They have a giant hub here in El Paso. It's huge. And I like to go down there frequently, and I just shoot trains. So this is from a Canonet QL17G3, and that's a normal 40 millimeter perspective. Next, this is where Highway 54 meets Trans Mountain in El Paso, and those are the Franklin Mountains in the background. That's what separates east and west El Paso, is that mountain range. And here, this is an Olympus 35 SP, and that's at 42 millimeters. And it's taken almost at sunset. It's getting, you can see where I'm getting some flare, right? I'm flaring the lens here because the sun is setting. And here's a Yashica Electro 35 GSN at 45 millimeters. So this is just one of these ice, you know, if you're going to a picnic or something, you want to stop and get some ice. These are these ice dispensaries. Okay, so let's talk about, and here's what's interesting. I find this is fascinating to me, absolutely fascinating. So in street photography, you have basically three camps in street photography. You have the 28 millimeter camp, 35 millimeter camp, and the 50 millimeter camp. So let's talk about some of the famous photographers who belong to each camp. Gary Winogrand was from the 28 millimeter camp. Joel Meyerowitz was from the 35, or is from the 35 camp. He's still alive, of course. And then Henri Cartier-Bresson was from the 50 millimeter camp. And these are all three Leica shooters. And I didn't choose these three just because they shot Leica. I just chose them randomly because each one represented a different camp. Okay? And it's funny because the same thing exists in portraiture. You have all this disagreement, whether it's 85, 105, or 135. So it's so analogous between street photographers. There's three camps, and for portrait photographers, there's three separate camps. And it's just I'm fascinated by how, you know, there's this subdivision within the genre and how each person aligns with his or her own camp, right? His or her own tribe. So here I have 35 millimeter f1.4 was considered the go-to de rigueur journalism or press lens, and I have that lens, and it was used by a lot of different journalism, you know, newspapers and such. I have the Nikon 35 1.4 AIS lens, manual focus. It's a tremendous lens, absolutely wonderful lens. And here I have, it's kind of an interesting observation. So wouldn't you figure if 40 to 43 around there is the normal field of view, wouldn't you think there would be a large camp? You'd think there'd be a large street photography camp who belong to that focal length, somewhere between 40 and 43. But I don't really think there's any famous photographers, street photographers, who shot with a 40. And I'm just perplexed by that. I'm just absolutely fascinated that there's no famous photographer who shot with a 40 or a 42 or a 43. Just interesting. Okay, and I want to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you would be so kind. You can ask any questions below or leave any comments below in the comment section. I would just ask respectfully to please keep your comments civil and above board, right? Keep it academic, and so we can, you know, just be professional about it. And I will reply to any questions you have. And again, I thank you, and I wish you a wonderful day.